Hey everybody, Katie here. I'm excited to be back with you all. I know it's been a while, especially for the podcast listeners out there. And this is my first video podcast, and you'll know more why I'm doing video format in a little bit as we dive into my jaw journey. But for those of you listening to the audio version, if you want to access the video, you can head on over to the YouTube link that we'll provide in the show notes for this episode. So, as I mentioned, today we're going to dive into more understanding around the jaw, and especially I want to dive into my own jaw journey because some of you know that I'm actually preparing to go in for a pretty major jaw surgery in about 2 weeks. And this has, been a 10 plus year journey for me of working with the jaw, and there's a lot that has gone into this decision that I want to chat about a bit and also share some resources because I know so many of you really struggle with jaw issues. It's hugely connected to trauma in the body, which I deeply feel is the reason I'm actually having to go in and get surgery, which we'll talk about a little bit later on in this episode. But I also am creating this because maybe most importantly, it's been so helpful for me to watch, hear, and listen into other people who have gone through this similar experience with the jaw. I have kind of a very complex issue happening physically or medically in my jaw that I've worked, again, 10 plus years around to get into a pretty stable place, but for the final real sustainable change, I actually do end up needing some surgical intervention, which I know a lot of people get jaw surgery before actually looking into some of the alternatives. And I want to talk about some of what my journey has been with my jaw and what has led me to where I'm at today. So it'll be both like a personal story and then also some sharing of resources and talking about how I'm preparing for surgery. And I'm also planning to hop back on after surgery at some point, maybe a couple of times, and just give you all a bit of an update around how the healing is going, what I'm learning, and especially as many of you know, I work in this field of trauma recovery, of somatics, of yoga therapy. And so I do feel really curious how this experience in my life is going to inform my work, and feel pretty confident that I'll have some great resources and stories to share with you afterwards. So let's go ahead and dive in. I want to start by just giving you a bit of a backstory of me and my jaw. Some of you might know me already. Some of you might be really new to this work and this page and just have been like Googling about jaw surgery. Maybe you're thinking about getting it too. So I'll give you a bit more context around who I am and really what has led me to this point, because I actually haven't shared much about my jaw story openly up until this point. So where to begin? Well, I think we'll begin in the here and now, the present moment, with where my jaw is currently at today. So I have a condition called hyperplasia where one side of my jaw has grown quite a lot longer and thicker than the other. And usually what causes bone growth is actually a pull on the fascia and the muscles. So my thought is part of what has caused this is just extreme fascial and muscular tightness over a long period of time. And we'll talk more about that later on. So that's one piece, is that my literal jaw on the right side has grown quite a lot longer than the left side. And you can't quite tell just physically from looking at me. I'll kind of show you with my hands in a moment what I'm talking about. And I also have pretty large bone growth inside of my right jaw joint on top of the condyle that's going to need to be removed. So I have excessive bone is pretty much the issue that's happening. So I've got this extra bony mass inside of my jaw, and the right side of my jaw has just grown quite a lot longer than my left. If I show you the angles of my jaw, which we have one on the left and one on the right, you can see that they're just not quite even, and it might not even be something that you can see with the eye. Also just attach an image of our like x-ray stuff because it's a little bit easier to see without my face in front of the jaw area. But what again has happened is the right side has just grown in a non-sustainable pattern where now I'm having a lot of issues with my bites. My back teeth don't touch, and I don't touch on the right side either. It's functional enough where I can eat. I'm not in like extreme constant pain. And a big reason for this is a lot of the other work that I've done for a really long period of time. So it's not like I'm getting emergency surgery and this needs to happen or it's going to be catastrophic. But I will eventually need it because my teeth are going to keep wearing down on the left side. And also, just from a nervous system perspective, it can feel a bit dysregulating for the nervous system to not have the bite come together and not have the bite touch. And there's so many cranial nerves and important nerves and nervous system functions around the mouth that are really important to bring into more balance. And now's feeling like a really good time in my life to do this rather than waiting for, another 5-10 years. I'm like, okay, now's a good time to do this. So that's a bit of what's happening. And so I'm going to be going in about 2 weeks for a long surgery. It's going to be an 8-hour surgery. It's pretty complex. I'll be in the hospital for a couple of nights probably, and we'll have a bit of a long recovery journey. So you might not hear from me a ton for a little while after, as I'll have to recover my functions in speaking and eating and all of that. And where I'm at today is just in this, 2 weeks prior preparatory phase of getting a lot of body work done and getting my diet really in a good place so that I can heal as smoothly and quickly as possible. I feel positive about the surgery. There has been a lot of, over the past 6 months or so, cycles of grief and frustration and a lot of fear, and the fear still comes up. I definitely feel nervous for it. And it feels like the right decision for me right now. So, what has led me to this point? I'm going to tell you a little bit more about what has been going on, because I actually hadn't received the diagnosis of what was actually happening in my jaw with the bone growth and the hyperplasia until about 6 months ago, which has kind of brought me into this cascade toward the surgery that I'll be getting. But I've had issues for a really, really long time. And this, I feel, is really connected to early childhood, traumatic experiences, sexual abuse, being a very sensitive person, especially a girl, a woman, and really shutting down a lot of my voice and my anger. I would grind my teeth. I've had braces several times. So there's just a lot that physically I was really holding around my mouth and my jaw. And I'm also a singer and really suppressed that part of me for a very, very long time. And it hasn't been until the past couple of years that I've really been allowing myself to explore that part of me more fully. So psycho-emotionally, there have been a lot of experiences that have caused extreme tightness and dysfunction in this area of my body. And I wasn't really aware of how to repattern or release that until later on in my life when the bones had already really been impacted from those experiences. I was also working with a shaman earlier this month because for me, if I'm going to be getting a surgery like this, I want to also be approaching the psycho-emotional and spiritual components that are connected to where this growth came from in the first place and what's really happening on a subtle level in my body. And so I was working with a shaman earlier this month, and we both had the same vision at the same time of me at some point in time being energetically punched in the jaw. And when I show you the graphic, you'll see it really does look like someone has just come in and like there's just kind of, it looks like I was punched in the jaw or I had a jaw trauma at some point in time. My surgeon even said it looks like at some point I like had a huge trauma or broke my jaw, and that's never happened to my awareness. But there, of course, could have been a birth experience or an early life experience that I just don't remember that started to cause some of this. So that brings me kind of to another component of what I feel really contributed to this. Of course, there could be a genetic component and a component around diet or minerals or other pieces to posture, though I am really good about those things and have been for a long time, is when we suppress a lot of sympathetic stress, so fight or flight patterns, anger, especially anger for me, but anger and fear, these physically reside in the throat, neck, jaw, head, face, arms, and chest. And so any kind of issues structurally, musculoskeletally in these areas of the body oftentimes are really connected to a repressed sympathetic response. If you have no idea what I'm talking about, you can learn more. It's like what our whole body of work is about. So just keep watching videos, or you can join our program Rooted too, which has a lot of information about this. But I want to assume that you have that basic information. So I also feel like there's a deep quality of repressed anger connected to this patterning in my jaw. Another piece that I've been aware of for 7 years or so is a tongue tie, which, if you're not familiar with what a tongue tie is, this is a really important topic, especially if you struggle with anxiety or have breathing problems, snore, sleep apnea, anything like that. Looking into this body of work around tongue ties is really fascinating. And beneath your tongue, you have a piece of fascia that attaches your tongue to the floor of the mouth. It's kind of similar to the webbing between your fingers. And for some people, this webbing grows in a bit thicker and really restricts movement of the tongue so that the tongue can't lay in its natural resting place along the roof of the mouth. And that's really where we want the tongue to rest all of the time, is lips together, mouth closed, and the tongue, the whole belly of the tongue rests along the roof of the mouth, even the back of the tongue. And if it can't quite reach, or that's, a lot of us have dysfunctional tongue placement in general, but especially in early childhood when your palate is developing, that is what helps to create more broadness and space in the palate. So a lot of us who have had tongue ties like myself get a bit of a shortened, collapsed palate, and then there's going to be a whole lot of fascial restrictions and compensation patterns throughout the entire body. So I did just get a frenectomy about 2 months ago, where I had my tongue tie released, and that's been a pretty wild journey in itself, with just having way more space and movement in my tongue and just better functioning of my tongue. It's felt really, really good. It's been an intense recovery process. Probably not as intense as this next one will be, but it's felt really, really helpful. And this is, again, an important body of work to kind of look into if you're curious about jaw issues. It's a great place to begin, as well as working with a myofunctional therapist, which is what I've been doing leading up to the frenectomy, my tongue tie release, and leading into this jaw surgery as well, to just make sure I'm really getting all of my muscles in a good place before we go in and make any of these big changes that are coming. So through the past 10 years or so, I've felt the asymmetry and pain and imbalance of my jaw, and definitely when I was first working on this, it was way more acute. I couldn't really open my mouth past an inch, so my jaw was kind of locked closed, and like if I wanted to take a bite of a burger, it was really, really hard for me to do that. And I went and saw my dentist, as many people do, and they put me on Invisalign to help fix my bite, and that just made everything a lot worse. And so then I kind of let go of this like Western approach and dental work and all of that, and really decided to dive deeper into some craniosacral therapies and myofunctional therapy, myofascial release work, and got to the point where I was doing a lot of practices that brought my jaw into a really, really good place. And it continued to improve and get better and better and better, especially as I started diving more into somatic yoga therapy, awakening my voice, and just working more with the vagus nerve and cranial nerves and really supporting my jaw and coming into a more relaxed resting position. So even given that I have this growth and the hyperplasia, the imbalance of the actual bone, my jaw is in a pretty healthy and stable space, all things considering. Like, it could be way worse, and it was way worse in the past. I've gotten to a really, really stable place with it. And all these resources that I shared are places that I would really recommend to begin, especially if you're being recommended something from a doctor or a dentist that just isn't quite feeling right. Of course, I have to say, like, always listen to your doctor's advice. And there are alternatives that can be really helpful, like, again, myofascial release work, especially releasing some of the fascia around the face, the ears, the neck, and head. Clinical somatic releases, which is a lot of what we go into in Rooted, our online course. Craniosacral therapy can be very, very helpful. General stress reduction, because when we're stressed out, we tend to grind our teeth. Emotional release work, especially around rage and anger. All of these pieces can be really helpful, because if we think about what survival patterning gets stuck in the jaw, it's either this shutdown, getting quiet and silent so that you're not heard, or wanting to actually bite into something. So there can be some residual patterns of, oh, and also yelling, of course, patterns left from previous traumas or stressful experiences that we've shut down that can cause residual tension and holding in these areas of the body, and that can really impact the bone. Now, I know a lot of people who have TMJ or jaw issues haven't had impact on the bone in the way that I have. In a very unique case, and like, it's a pretty niche surgery. A lot of people that I've dove into around this topic have gotten what's called orthognathic surgery, which is a piece of what I'll be getting, where they kind of split your bottom jaw into 3 pieces, reset your top jaw. And a lot of people get that. And my feeling is maybe not everybody who gets it truly really needs it, or has been referred to and done a lot of the preparatory work to really set up their system for a very integrative experience, because surgery is a trauma in the body. There's no doubt about that. And it's really great to prepare your body beforehand and also be really resourced in the recovery period, which is a big piece that I've been working on and focusing on the past 6 months or so, is just getting everything into a good place so that this process can go as smoothly as possible. So orthognathic is one of the surgeries that I'll be getting that you may have gotten before or you may have heard about. They oftentimes use this for like issues with your bite and facial development, which again, like if we were taught when we were little about tongue placement and proper breathing and just how to release stress, I really feel like people's jaws wouldn't develop in the way that we're seeing. And there's even been some studies that the introduction of white sugar into the diet has really changed things with our bites and with our jaws, and just created less space in the mouth in general. So anyhow, if you're on like the precipice and you actually do really need to get surgery, that's, you know, fine. That's where I'm at. That's fine. Like sometimes we just need these sort of very Western interventions, and it's great that we have them. And I'm such an advocate for really taking care of the other outlets of healing and support as well. Seeing an osteopath, craniosacral, myofascial release, body work, physical therapy, these sort of pieces that can really make a big difference and maybe prevent you from actually having to need surgery, which I really wish I had access to when I was little. I really feel like if, like what many people do when they recognize there's a tongue tie, is just release them in the infant after birth. And that can really make a huge difference in how the entire jaw develops later on in life. And also just learning more about how as I already spoke to, we can release some pent-up emotions that cause jaw issues and receive more support for the nervous system in general. I really feel like there wouldn't be nearly as many jaw issues, especially because a lot of the ways that Western medicine goes to support jaw issues is straight into braces, which can oftentimes, and in my case, cause more issues than perhaps benefit. Of course, there's a time and place. I'm not saying you should never get braces. Like, get them if you need them. That's also going to be a stress and a trauma in the body, just like surgery is, which it's also important to have these somatic tools for preparing and recovering from a surgical procedure or from braces, and really letting the stress that gets stuck in the body integrate after those experiences. So I feel so lucky, to be honest, that I have these resources of an osteopath and a chiropractor and a cranial sacral therapist, and a lot of resources that aren't available to many people, or that many people just aren't aware of. That for many of you, that might be just exactly what you need to get everything back into balance, as well as the somatic work. So again, I'm really not trying to make this episode a plug for our course Rooted at all, but it is a great place to start if you know your jaw issues have a psycho-emotional component. So I know some of you are curious about what they'll be doing in surgery. I mentioned a little bit about that earlier, but I'll just share a little bit more about the surgery and the recovery process, which is similarly intense. And I definitely feel scared for it. And I've been working a lot around plugging into protection, safety, support, love. But yeah, surgery is a big deal, and it's normal to feel afraid before getting surgery. So yes, so what we'll be doing in 2 weeks is, again, Orthognathic, which is resetting my top jaw and then my bottom jaw, and then they're also going to be removing a growth from inside of the jaw joint. So again, it's about an 8-hour procedure, and I'm going to be pretty swollen and out of it for a while afterwards. I'll be on an all liquid diet for about a month to 6 weeks, depending on how things are going. So the next time that you see me, I might look different. At least the bottom third of my face might be a bit of a different shape. So that's going to be a whole psychological process for me to adapt to, and for those of you used to seeing my face to adapt to as well. And it might, like, from stories that I've heard, my surgeon says I'll be back on my feet a month after the surgery, which I think is true. But from a lot of what I've heard, for many people, the swelling doesn't go down for six months or more, and it can take up to a year or two before the body really fully integrates the experience. So I'm prepared for a long healing process, and I know that it will come in waves. And again, I have a lot of resources and support for working with the jaw, a lot of different exercises and practitioners that I see. And if you have any questions specifically on any of what I'm doing for my jaw, you're welcome to send them in, and I can answer them in the next video that I make. And yeah, just, I guess I'll end with just this whole experience has been a huge reminder to me of my humanness, and getting me really in touch with imperfection in a deep way, getting me really in touch with death in a way. And yeah, I think that's kind of what medical issues can do, is bring up a lot emotionally. And so really grateful to have somatic pieces and therapists and healers and a really good surgeon. Grateful to have good timing for this experience and a lot of support in my family and from my friends. And yeah, and when I see you or you hear from me on the other side, I plan to just give you a bit of an update on how it went and how I'm doing, as well as share any advice for those of you who are also going to be going through something similar. So I hope this helps. One, give those of you who know me really well an idea of what it is that I'll be going through in the next couple of months. So if you don't hear from me for a little while, that's why. Two, for anybody who struggles with the jaw, I hope this gave you some idea of some more resources to do before you need to get surgery in the way that I do. And especially if you have children, like just supporting them when they're really young so that we can prevent this from happening later on in their life. And three, for those of you who do need to get a surgery such as this, to just have another connection point and person in your life to hear about how the process went. So thanks for listening and send me a lot of good energy. I'm taking deep breaths and taking it one day at a time. Okay, bye.